Okay, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Lauren Martin Clemens, and I'm the head of marketing at Pypestream. Today, we have something new. I'm excited to share a new webinar series with you called Beyond the Bot. In this series, we explore the often overlooked aspects of implementing digital assistants and chatbots. And you'll hear from various members of our in house team of experts as they offer insights to enhancing customer engagement and streamlining operations. Our webinar today is called The Evolution of Customer Service, the Dynamic Nature of Generative AI. And our speaker is none other than the Gen AI expert herself, Elana Feldman. Elana is the Chief Customer Officer and resident generative AI expert here at Pypestream. Throughout her tenure, Elana has excelled in various roles within customer success, driving exceptional results and fostering strong client relationships. Before joining Pypestream, Elana was a speech scientist at Nuance Communications, where she honed her expertise in computational linguistics and voice technology. So, with that, I will hand it over to Elana.
Thanks, Lauren. I'm going to start sharing.
Okay.
So today I'm going to talk about, as Lauren said, the evolution of customer service with the advent of generative AI and how we are using it and thinking about it here at Pypestream. So just to start, I'm going to take a little bit of a step back and go through a little bit of an overview of what it means when we say AI, artificial intelligence, what generative AI means, and then get into how we're using it. So AI is not a new concept technically. It's been around for 30, 40 years. And it's really just the theories of how machines act like humans. So that's the artificial part of intelligence. There's a lot of different aspects to AI. All of these you can see in this diagram. And what we're talking about here is this tiny little center of it, which is the new area of generative AI and large language models. And it really sits at the center of a lot of the different fields inside of AI. What's new about generative AI is that it is trained on billions and billions of parameters, which hence the large language models, which is larger than anything that we've had before. And is really allowing us to come up with these nuanced and interesting models that can create content in the tone of whatever content they are ingesting for their training. This is different than traditional or discriminative AI, where discriminative AI is a model that looks at a lot of different content and then is able to classify content into the categories it already knows, whereas generative AI is able to actually take the next step and create new categories of things and generate that text, hence generative AI. Generate text, images, music, many other different types of content based on the patterns that's recognized, but it takes that leap of intelligence. What we're really focused on at Pypestream is what we're calling generative self-service. So it's not just that chat GPT interaction of back and forth, having that conversation where the Gen AI can help you answer questions. What we're focused on is automation and making sure that we can get things done by using generative AI to make sure that we can do that effectively and easily for our customers. A typical kind of chat GPT experience would say, if you say book me a flight to Paris for June 12th, it'll say, maybe it'll give some examples of here are some flights that you could possibly take. But everyone will be familiar with this answer of, I can't assist you with that as I'm an AI model and can't necessarily take that action. What we're doing at Pypestream is taking the information that we pull from generative systems. So in this case, we're going to show that you can fly from Washington, Dulles, where I'm based, to Paris for whatever price it is on whatever day. And then we're going to ask the user to take that next step of, do you want to book a flight, see more, and help them get to their goal with the content that we derived from the generative model. The way that we think about it is really this is a hybrid AI model where we are using the best of conversational AI. So it's those flows where we define if the user says this, then we should respond with this path. And we have these types of interactions and these integrations to backend systems. But that's not necessarily super human-like. With the generative side of it, where we're able to create those on the fly back and forth, pull information from lots of different of mediums without necessarily having programmed that beforehand. So it leads to a very flexible and dynamic conversation, but is also one that gets to a task-oriented goal. Um, We do this through RAG grounded conversation. So RAG is retrieval augmented generation, which is where we are providing the LLM or the generative model with lots of relevant information that we're pulling from backend systems, we're pulling from websites, we're pulling from databases to make sure that the LLM, which is, as I said, billions and billions of parameters that understand lots of different things in the world, that it's actually thinking top of mind about the content that um, we want it to respond about. So it's kind of that short-term memory versus long-term memory, where the RAG and that retrieval augmented generation part of it will give it that short-term memory to be top of mind when it's answering these questions. Um, the way that we also think about it is there's really two different ways that you can use generative AI in conversational experiences. One of them is that user-facing, that front-end generation, where the model is actually on the fly coming up with these responses and presenting it to the user. So that kind of more standard chat experience that we're familiar with, versus processing information. So this is where we are taking input from what the user is saying, taking something from maybe a database or an integration, and using generative AI to make the connection, and then do something else and process that and show something back to the user. I'll go through some examples of what these are, but that's really, we are using both of these. But what we find is that in a lot of consumer-facing examples, the processing of the information is actually more powerful and more useful to the business than just allowing the chat to answer for on behalf of the business. So in that content creation, as I said, things like this are those kind of back and forth, the open FAQs, the dialogue, idea generation. So this is where we're actually relying on the model to present something to the user. We have less control. We do have control, as I said, because of the RAG, because of prompt engineering and LLM tuning. But we do have less control over what's being shown to the user in this case, because we are allowing the model to respond. This has some really great implementations also with things like translation, where we're able to say, take all of this content and just present it in Spanish. And the model is able to do that very easily. With content processing, as I said, this is more about creating that connection in the back end between what the user is asking and the options that we have. So this is where we're asking for specific pieces of information from the user, or we're asking to really for them to just tell us in a paragraph things that they want or need or are looking for. And then we're using the model to pull out through entity extraction what they've said and prompt only for the remaining pieces of information that we need. If you do have any questions, please do put them in the chat and Lauren can relay them over to me. I know I'm going fairly quickly. So the things that we are thinking about using generative AI in conversational AI for is around creating more time to value. So this is not really on the consumer side, but this is how do we convert our customers' websites or databases or whatever form of content they have into these conversational experiences as fast as possible. And historically, that happens through content writers and teams of people sifting through content and making it conversational. But we're able to do that much faster using generative AI, because we're able to prompt it to say, here's the content. How would you answer this as the role of whatever agent we're looking for? Additionally, a big place where we're using generative AI is in agent efficiency. So this is with automated summaries of conversations. This is with prompting the agent of maybe this is the right response. What we find is often we'll build something for an agent that will prompt them with the right response, and that ends up actually being able to just go directly to the consumer, which really decreases that time it takes the agent to look for the right response, write it, edit it, and send it. All of that can happen through Gen AI. And then the last one here is customer experience. So we're always looking for ways to make the customer experience easier, faster, and really put the burden of doing anything onto the system. So if that is that example that I talked about of give us a very broad paragraph about what you want to talk about and what happened to you in the case of maybe an insurance claim, and then we'll do the work of figuring out what we need to pick out and what information we need to follow up on. We often do this through A/B testing. So we're able to say, here's the flow where we ask every question one by one versus here's the flow where we allow users a little bit more freedom to tell us what they want. And we're able to see what that leads to higher CSAT, what leads to faster engagements, and increased helpfulness scores. So here's some examples of where we've been using generative AI to do kind of all three of those things, and I'll talk about it. So here, this is this OCR document ingestion. And what we're able to do here, this is the ultimate moving the burden of knowing anything about the document from the user to the system. So in this case, what's being shown here is this user is uploading an EOB, an explanation of benefits. And what we're doing is we're using the OCR to pick out the right pieces of information. And then we're able to say, and here's the relevant pieces that we need. And we can ask for any further questions, but we're not asking the user to input any of this information. We're not asking them to identify, we read that is this your account number, et cetera. All of that we know because we have a model trained on these types of documents. Similarly, for entity extraction, we're able to, as I said, take a paragraph and say, here's what we're looking for. So we're looking for things like dates, times, names, places, and we're able to pull those out of these paragraphs rather than collecting all that information, even in a form where it can take a little bit more time for the user to give us that information. And we've seen this lead to an increased completion rate because we only need to ask maybe 50% of the questions that we were asking previously. An FAQ automation. This is going back to that or time to value of creating content. So this is where we can take lots of different content that isn't necessarily chat focused and train a model on all of that content, and then tell the LLM to answer as a chat would, which is able to increase satisfaction. We also see an increase in helpfulness, where the users are saying not only did they get an answer, but it actually was a helpful answer. Conversation summary is one of those use cases that's specifically meant for agents and agent efficiency. So if a user has a long conversation with the automation and then needs to escalate for whatever reason, we're able to give a conversation summary highlighting specific pieces of information that the agent needs to know upfront. This can help them decrease first response time because they don't need to read through the entire conversation to be able to then respond with the appropriate type of greeting. And they're not going to ask those repetitive questions of what's your name, what's your account number. We have all that information and it's surfaced to them right there. We've seen this actually have a decrease on average handle time in a meaningful way for the agents using this functionality. A couple more. So fallback out of scope. This is really goes into that hybrid model that I was talking about, where we have both a traditional discriminative AI model that we are going to use to classify as many things as possible and give them our pre-trained responses on. But when we hit that out of scope, or our pre-trained model doesn't know about whatever the user is asking about, relying on generative AI to give an answer outside of our pre-trained scope has been very helpful for us. So this again impacts that helpfulness metric, where not only are they now getting an answer where they were not getting an answer before, but it has a higher chance of being helpful to them. So advanced idea generation, this is a little bit more on that content creation side, where we're able to now have the user tell us a little bit about what they're looking for. In the case of the example here, it's a quiz where they're telling us, here's my perfect car, what it would look like. And then we're able to actually match that to things inside of our inventory and say, here's what your perfect car would look like, here is your perfect car, and here's where you can buy it. We're able to do this with any type of real life goods that is available inside of a database and available inside to buy. And this has actually led to higher conversions because we're able to explain to the user that based on your answers, here's the perfect product for you. Here's why, based on what you said. Um, and we can go directly into a sales flow from the recommendations. The last thing here I'm going to talk about is instruction generation. This is what we think of it as turn any agent into your best agent, because we are creating these flows that keep our agents in a very rigid. They have to collect specific pieces of information, um, and then what we're asking the model to do is summarize all of this information and put it into a note that is going to be disseminated to whoever else needs to see this information. So it keeps everything standardized. It makes sure that we are collecting all of the right information, and it decreases processing time on the back end, because we never have to go back and ask an agent to call someone back and say, hey, actually, I forgot to ask this question, or here's other piece of information, because the AI is prompting for here's all the pieces of information that you need to collect, and then it checks it at the end while it's generating that note. Okay. That's what I had to cover today. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take them now.
Yes, there are definitely questions. So we have two questions that just came through. The first one is, to train a model, does the client need to provide data in a certain format, or is it, you'll take whatever kind of they have? Is it like training materials, or do you look at do you listen to recordings or conversation transcripts? How does that work?
Yeah, great question. So we can take conversations in, or we can take data in any format. So things
Mhm.
like PDFs or databases are fantastic for us. We're typically going to use it to augment an existing foundation model. So we don't need that much data. Um, but as long as it is either in a text format or able to be converted to a text format, so something like a call transcript, that is perfect for us.
Okay, cool, good. And then the second question is, how do the analytics change between a traditional, so like a not a generative AI backed chatbot versus a chatbot that does use generative AI?
That's a great question. Such great questions.
Yeah,
Um,
really good.
so I think the analytics actually get a lot more interesting. You get it more into text mining once you're in generative AI, because you're opening it up to user free text much more often. We are also able to do a lot of accuracy checks and make sure that things are actually returning properly inside of a generative AI model, where and and adjust prompting very quickly without necessarily going back and retraining the whole model in the way that we would have to with a traditional classification model, or adding content. So it's been an interesting evolution of the analytics. We are still looking at task oriented goals, so conversions, things like that. They don't change because we are still tracking that the same way that we were previously. Um, but we are also able to do a lot more text mining and create those more personalized profiles of what users are wanting and what they're saying.
So with generative AI, is that how you're getting things like the happiness index that you had on the other slide? Was that possible before, I suppose, is the question.
The helpfulness index.
The helpfulness, sorry, helpfulness, yeah.
Yeah, so that was possible before because the way that we measure that is by asking users, "Was that helpful?"
Okay.
After we give them an answer.
Mhm.
Um, but what we are seeing is an increase in people saying, "Yes, that was helpful," when things have been generated by this generative AI model that is trained and fine-tuned on this content.
Okay, I see. Okay, awesome. Great. That was all the questions that came through. But if you guys have any other questions for Alana, please go ahead and comment on the event. It's there live on LinkedIn, so you can absolutely continue to ask questions. We have a couple webinars coming up later in the month and next month. So please follow along, and we will see you next month. Thank you, Alana.
Thank you.